Man, I don't know about all of you, but my week has gone swimmingly now that the Shula Bowl trophy is insured to be in Boca for another 364 days. Next year's not a leap year, is it? 365. It doesn't matter. It's back for another calendar year. And so I hope, like me, your week has been absolutely fantastic and uplifted. Welcome to another edition of the Florida Atlantic Voice, wherever you get your podcast. The Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group, personal injury lawyers. Robes Law Group, always putting the community first. Office Delray Beach, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. I want to thank them for investing in the podcast, becoming partners of the podcast, and I really appreciate them. John Mitchell and company at Robes Law Group, thank you for jumping aboard the Florida Atlantic Voice. Welcome to the family. Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group. So now that we're starting to come down a little bit from the glow of winning yet another Shula Bowl, I thought it would be fun to go through a little bit of an FAU fan mailbag. We'll do this every couple of weeks. Your chance to ask me some questions that maybe in an official FAU setting I wouldn't be able to answer. But here on the Florida Atlantic Voice, I will do my best to do so. And also, I wanted to take a look at the FAU basketball non-conference schedule, since that's become official as well. John Jakus and company, they're practicing, they're getting themselves ready for the season, pretty much a whole new roster, so everybody trying to come together and become a cohesive unit. There's some heavy expectations coming out of the Yelly. Let's go ahead and get right to it, shall we? And again, Florida Atlantic Voice, download it. Subscribe to it, again wherever you get your podcasts. It's absolutely everywhere. Okay, so if it's Spotify, if it's Apple, if it's some third rate or extremely rare podcast hub, don't worry, Florida Atlantic Voice is going to be there. Okay, it is there for you. Florida Atlantic Voice podcast. Subscribe to it and download it wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so part of the fun of the FAU fan mailbag is that I have not yet looked at all the questions that I received. So it's fun. It's off the cuff. And you know what they call that in the business as well? Lazy. So let's get to it, shall we? This comes from Aaron. Ken, is the Paradise Pod replacing the Florida Atlantic Voice? Aaron, thank you for the question. And the answer to that is no. And some of you might not know what Aaron's even talking about. The Paradise Pod is a new podcast venture through FAU Athletics that covers all athletics. I'm doing that with Damon Arnett, my FAU basketball broadcast partner and the all-time FAU basketball great. Still, by the way, is the record holder in FAU basketball history for scoring average in a season. But no, Paradise Pod, not replacing the Florida Atlantic Voice. This is the Florida Atlantic Voice, what you're listening to right here. Well, this is proof that it's not going anywhere. And again, Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Rob's Law Group. Paradise Pod, though, totally different beast. Very much like Shannon Sharp has several different podcasts. Sort of like, I mean, there's a number. Joe Rogan has several different types of podcasts. And yeah, I'll put myself in their category. They have millions and millions and millions of downloads. We'll get to a couple hundred here in about a year's time with your help and word of mouth. I think that, hey, why not, right? We can get ourselves to a couple hundred. We can keep pushing the envelope. But again, two different entities. Florida Atlantic Voice focuses primarily on football and basketball, and it is in no way affiliated with FAU other than the fact that I'm the play-by-play voice of FAU. This one's a little more candid. This one's probably a little bit more opinionated. Paradise Pod, that is through FAU Athletics, and that features the entire spectrum of FAU athletics. Okay, so I hope that that answers your question. Mike G asked the following in this FAU mailbag. Which player on FAU has the best chance of being drafted and possibly making an impact in the NFL? That's a really good question. That's an extremely good question. And honestly, it's not one that I even had asked myself yet this year. So I also was asked this by the studio host for UConn football. And by the way, UConn hosts FAU 7 o'clock Saturday night on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network. Myself and Chris Newbold have the call at 7. Mike Maresco, your pregame at 6:30. The flagship Fox Sports 640. Also the Fox Sports 640 app. Don't fret, it's free. Go ahead and just fire it up, and you'll hear us if you're outside of the listening area or doing something that precludes you from getting to a radio. But the studio host, as I pre-recorded something for their pregame show, asked me the same thing. And I think that the popular answer right now is probably just based on early returns. CJ Hurd, I think that that's a name that a lot of our brains immediately go to, the outstanding freshman safety. But let's talk about the next FAU player to get a shot in the NFL. And I think it definitely comes on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that it might be Bugs Brown, the corner. I don't know how an NFL scout doesn't see 6'3", agile, physical, good hands, strong ball control for a corner, and doesn't say, I tell you what, we can do something with this guy. I just have a sneaking suspicion the next FAU player, and this is not to diminish a Jackson Ambush or a Jaden Wheeler or a Chris Jones. They all could get their shot in the NFL. I'm just saying from a pure physical standpoint, from a pure what NFL scouts are looking for perspective, I just think that Bugs Brown and that big, long, strong 6'3" frame, I think that he is probably next man up when it comes to interest from the NFL. So I'll go with Bugs Brown in that spot. I could certainly see it happening, and maybe it's the next Trey Hendrickson, if you will. By the way, I don't know if you saw that Bengals Chiefs game, and I don't care what anybody says, the Bengals got jobbed. Patrick Mahomes getting bailed out on just throwing the ball up on a 4th and forever and getting a pass interference. Stop it. The same thing that happened on that play happens on every Hail Mary. And for my money, that was, even though it didn't quite look like it, throw across your body, toss a rainbow in the air, a one isolated receiver, that was a Hail Mary for all intents and purposes. And that pass interference bailed him out so Harrison Butker could kick that field goal. I'm not bitter or anything from a Trey Hendrickson standpoint. But Trey Hendrickson in that game was awesome. I mean, just a machine, drawing a critical hands to the face penalty that set up the Chiefs in 4th and forever and should have won the Bengals the game because he couldn't be contained. He had several crucial holding calls committed against him. He's unstoppable, man. He is absolutely unstoppable. And he had requested a trade earlier in the offseason. The Bengals said, nope, sorry, man. And so he sort of, because he's an upstanding person, he said, all right, well, I'll probably continue to play for the Bengals. But if he keeps doing that, because he was the only pass rusher that got any pressure on Jacoby Brissett either in week 1 against the Patriots. If he keeps playing like this and keeps being the only impact pass rusher in a Cincinnati Bengals uniform and doing things like that, single-handedly nearly winning them games as a pass rusher, Bengals, I know you've got some problems paying people, i.e. Jamar Chase, i.e. T. Higgins. You better get T. Hendrickson his money, or he's requesting another trade, and this time it's going to be for real, okay? Don't disrespect Trey Hendrickson because he's arguably defensively the best thing you got going right now. Let's get back to the mailbag here. The Chosen, thank you, The Chosen, for your message. Should the FAU-USF rivalry be called the Fight on the Turnpike and have a trophy to build up the rivalry? Here's my problem with that, The Chosen. I don't know what the Turnpike has to do with Tampa. The Turnpike doesn't go through Tampa. You take the Turnpike to 75, and then you go west, and you get to Tampa. Or you just don't get on the Turnpike at all unless you are taking the Turnpike north to 595 and taking Alligator Alley, taking take the turnpike to 74 and go west if you're in the Orlando area. Or, again, you go north on the turnpike and go west/north on 595 that then turns into 75. So there's nothing to do with the turnpike. All right, so that's not going to work. But I see where you're going with that. I understand what you're trying to say. What is the name of the FAU-USF rivalry? Here's the problem. There needs to be some buy-in with the USF side of things with this rivalry, and they are so obsessed. I mean, delusional. That fan base at USF, obsessed with leaving the American, going to a big conference, going to the ACC, going to the Big Ten. USF thinks it's going to the Big Ten. Oh, man, that is side-splitting. Or whatever other iteration of any other conference that's trying to be recreated or built from scratch out west. They think they're going there, that they're too good to be in the same conference as FAU. One, USF drives me crazy, and there's no fan base that I honestly can't stand more in all of college sports than USF's. But I digress. But let's come up with a name for it, even if it's only a year. I kind of like the Clash of the Coasts myself. I proposed it. I floated it. It didn't get a lot of feedback when FAU was going to the American, so I just kind of dropped it. But I like the Clash of the Coasts. Alberic, he suggested, how about the Sawgrass Scuffle or the Boca Bay Beach Battle? All right, Boca Bay Beach Battle is not bad. I like Boca versus Bay, if we want to go with that. That's not bad. The Sawgrass Scuffle or the Sawgrass Slugfest. All right. Like, now we're getting somewhere, though. This is good. Or South Florida versus the real South Florida. That could work as well. But no, the turnpike can't be a part of it. The war on 74, that worked for USF and UCF because of I-74. The turnpike does not go from South Florida to Tampa. Okay, so again, chosen sorry to nitpick the roadway geography of the state of Florida. I'm not trying to make an example of you. I'm just trying to kindly tell you why that wouldn't work. But you've inspired a good idea. You've planted a seed, and really, in this life, isn't that what we're going for? By the way, did you know the Florida Atlantic Voice is presented by Robes Law Group? ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Maddox, as we continue with our FAU fan mailbag here on the Florida Atlantic Voice. Does FAU have a chance to go to the Pac-12? I mean, don't we all have a chance to do anything we want, right, if we really put our mind to it? Maddox, to put it quite simply, And if it did happen, I'd be stunned. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever geographically. And I'm not going to speak for Brian White. I don't know. I'm just the guy who calls the games, okay? But I don't understand how it would make any semblance of sense for FAU to go to the Pac-12. I know that Jeff Traylor, the UTSA head coach, on his coaches show revealed that the Pac-12 is having very serious discussions with UTSA about joining a league that outside of Oregon State and Washington State is now going to feature San Diego State, is now going to feature Boise State and several other schools as they try and rebuild that thing. But I don't see FAU going to the Pac-12. I don't know what sense that would make. And quite honestly, and again, I don't mean to speak for Brian White, okay? But I just think that unless there's some sort of stunning money amount and the Pac-12 says, please, FAU, be a part of this, and it would be financially worth it to travel 3,000 miles to go play multiple times, most likely. And certainly multiple times, many times, if you're talking every sport, go 3,000 miles to play conference games, it better be really, really damn well worth it. Okay, so Pac-12, FAU, Maddox, I wouldn't count on it. Okay, that's just my my college athletics intuition kicking in. Albrecht with the next question here with the FAU mailbag. Do you think the concept of geography means anything at all to our sports beloved gods any longer? No. I think the Big Ten with Oregon and USC and UCLA, and the ACC with Stanford and Cal, that was the final warfare against common sense geography in college athletics. Those days are done. Okay. And in fact, those days have been done for quite some time. So I think a lot of you listening know this, but many of you might not. So I'll repeat it. I did not go to school at FAU. I do not have a degree from Florida Atlantic. I went to a school called Valparaiso, Valpo, as it's more commonly known in college basketball circles, in Northwest Indiana. And so when I went to college at Valpo, this was from 2002 to 2006, we were in the old Mid-Continent Conference. And so it was FAU. It was Valpo and IUPUI and Oakland of Michigan. Detroit. Was Detroit in it? Nah, I don't think Detroit was in it. But you get the idea. It was schools like that. Okay. And then you had Oral Roberts in Tulsa. That was far enough. But then they added Centenary in Louisiana for a couple of years. And then Southern Utah was in the conference as well. UMKC. Okay. So the Mid-Continent Conference, before its time, was spread out multiple time zones that didn't really quite make a ton of sense. So no, geography no longer matters in college sports, and we bag on the Big Ten and the ACC and Oregon and USC and UCLA and Cal and Stanford. But keep in mind, 20 years ago, there was a conference in America, a college basketball conference that had Valpo in Northwest Indiana and Southern Utah in the same exact conference. All right. So this has been a long-standing issue geographically. So no, geography doesn't matter in college sports anymore. Let's see here. What's up in the FAU fan mailbag? Lionel, he messages, how good is Weisman and how likely is he to be our starter next year? Thank you for the question. And I don't know how good Kasen Weisman is, the Colorado transfer, now the third string quarterback at FAU. Weisman, who did take a snap against FIU in relief of Cam Fancher, whose helmet came off one of the 5 times it happened against FIU and one of the probably 13 times it's happened through 3 weeks of the season. But Kasen Weisman came in and took a snap and handed it off, and that was the extent for him. Tyreek Starks had a little bit of an injury issue, and so it wasn't prudent for Tom Herman to send him out one play and risk an injury to the backup quarterback. I know they're high on Kasen Weisman, and I know Kasen Weisman has discussed that he came to FAU because he really wanted to work under Charlie Fry, who's had so much success grooming quarterbacks in his NFL coaching and college coaching career. So I do know that stock is real high on Kasen Weisman, extremely high on Kasen Weisman, but that would probably require some more movement on the roster or another quarterback battle next year. So I don't quite know. I don't know. I am in no position to say he has a chance to start at all when you already have an incumbent starting quarterback in Cam Fancher, who is not going to be exhausted of his college eligibility going into next year. So I could not confidently say that Kasen Weisman even has an opportunity to be the starter next year. But I do know that Charlie Fry and Tom Herman absolutely love the kid. And I do know that he flashed prominently in fall camp, and that kid can rip it. And he's got multiple arm angles, and he appears to be pretty patient in the pocket. And there's a reason when he went out of college or went out of high school that Colorado wanted him, that he was recruited to play power conference football. Kasen Weisman is a really good player, but I don't know when his time is going to come. I don't have a great answer for you. FAU Burner. Again, FAU fan mailbag here on the Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group. Who's going to emerge as wide receiver one? Who is going to emerge as wide receiver one? That is the immortal question here in 2024 FAU football. Who's going to emerge as the wide receiver one? This might sound like a cop-out, but no one? Why does there have to be a wide receiver one? FAU had a wide receiver one last year, and LeJontay Western, look what it got him. 4 wins. Okay? So you don't have to have a wide receiver one. And, in fact, Tom Herman talked about it a lot in the fall, how wide receiver production was going to be a whole lot more even. Distribution was going to be a lot more spread out, since really it was throw to one, throw to one, throw to one, throw to one all last year. This year, it's a much more level wide receiver playing field. I don't think a wide receiver one's going to emerge, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I know that Amari Hayes and Jay-Sean Platt have been the receivers that have flashed most here early. But what about Marlon Johnson? What about George Johnson? I think that if you spread the wealth around and there's no true wide receiver one, it's okay. Milan Tucker, he's gotten some targets and has started to contribute past just a return man. So there's some stuff there, okay? And the injury to E.J. Horton is tough. The injury to B.J. Alexander, tough. But I don't think that there's going to be a wide receiver one, and I don't think that there necessarily needs to be a wide receiver one either. Ed is the FAU mailbag continues. What did you think of the blue and white uniforms this past weekend? What's your favorite jersey? This is a good question, and I am definitely a jersey phobe. I could talk sports jerseys constantly. I grew up in Chicago, and look at this. You've got the classic white and black White Sox pinstriped uniform, which is a classic in and of itself. And then you've got the Chicago Bulls, classic black bulls across the chest. I mean, fantastic, just clean. Blackhawks, probably an offensive name at this point in 2024, but as far as the logo is concerned, there's no NHL sweater better than the Indian head on the front of the sweater. And then you've got the Bears, as classic as it gets, as old school as it gets, as identifiable as it gets, with the C with the pointy tail at the end. Notice how I ignored the Cubs because bleep the Cubs. I hate them. So I know a thing or two about classy uniforms, all right? And FAU's blue uniforms that they wore for the Shula Bowl, I love them. And I love the white version of those. Let me tell you a little story. It was back in 2020, and a number of FAU fans had really started to express interest in some throwbacks, some vintage jerseys, i.e., Rusty Smith era FAU uniforms, the dark blue, the white and red stripes, the white helmet. And so the FAU administration wanted to do something that would harken back to that and pay respect to the old school FAU football threads. And it had been a number of years that red had begun to be used as the primary color. And so the higher-ups wanted to do a little bit of a blue and white ensemble, because if you recall, those debuted in Willie Taggart's first year. And actually, the administration brought me into the conversation and asked me, hey, do you think that FAU football fans would like these? And they sent me a couple of mock-ups, and I thought they looked great. And that is what was produced. What you saw against FIU in the Shula Bowl and what you've seen sporadically, white and blue version, since 2020, that was the end result. And I think they're great. And I think that without exactly being the retro uniforms, the retro Howard Stellenberger early days, Jared Allen, Rusty Smith, FAU uniforms, they're as close as you're going to get. And it brings a little bit of a comfort to me to see that. I like that as an FAU fan. But there are some FAU fans that are just weird about the entire thing. Why are we wearing that? Why are we like? I had people in my mentions on social media. We're not wearing red in the Shula Bowl. Why? Why do we need to? Like, when did that become a prerequisite? You do recall Howard Schnellenberger lost only one Shula Bowl in his entire time as head coach at Florida Atlantic. And guess what they wore the entire time? White and blue. Red was never to be a primary color under Howard Schnellenberger. He hated that as a primary color. Okay, so what's the difference now? I don't know. I don't know what anybody's talking about. The red uniforms are great. And the multiple iterations of the red uniforms are awesome. But there's something to be said for going back to the old school blues and the old school whites sometimes. And it's okay. And I like them. And I'm surprised that they're not more embraced by FAU fans. And I don't know if maybe the red uniforms and the chrome letters and numbers, maybe FAU fans associate that more with the heyday of the Lane Kiffin era. Maybe that's the holdup here. But there is no uniform combination that FAU has than the whites and the blues that harken back to the Howard Schnellenberger days, the days of yesteryear, the era where the first memories of FAU football were made. So I don't get the pushback. And if FAU wore those every week, the white or the blues, with the red and white stripes or red and blue stripes, whatever color uniform we're talking about, I'd say that's great. I think it's sharp. I think it looks good, especially with the new helmet now, white helmet with the palm tree on one side and the logo on the other. I think that's the best helmet in all of college football, in my humble opinion. As far as my favorite uniform is concerned, you know what I didn't like? Let's start with what I didn't like. I didn't like the Pelini era, early Partridge era. Adidas did this with every school that had a bird as its mascot, putting those little wings on the sleeves. The red, blue, white winged sleeve uniforms, then with the spread wing owl logo and the numbers on the other side. One side, outstretched owl on the helmet, and the other side, the number. I didn't like that. Looking back, it's not great. And I didn't like the outstretched winged owl anyways, as it was, as the primary FAU athletics logo. Like, it's fine, but the owl head is so much better and so much more identifiable. And I have a theory when it comes to logos as well. Even if you're the most novice of artists, you should be able to draw a logo. It's just great for branding. The owl outstretched wing logo, difficult to draw. Too many feathers, too many different things, detail going on with the outstretched wings. The owl head, I mean, that's pretty easy stuff right there. It's good. It's definitely good stuff. Okay. My favorite uniform. Oh, Ken, the red ones under Lane Kiffin. No. From a broadcaster standpoint, the red uniforms with the chrome lettering and numbering that FAU wore for years, hate them. Want to know why? Because during night games, it's impossible to see the chrome lettering and numbering. Those uniforms needed an outline around the chrome, and I hate to say it, but FIU did something similar, and they did it right. We did it, and it was bad. But we kept winning in them, so we just kept going. I actually had a former FAU equipment person or someone on the equipment staff go after me on social media because I made the comment that, man, these chrome letters and numbers on these red uniforms are really difficult for broadcasters because you can't see them. I don't like them. It would be great if we could go a different direction or modify them. And I got insulted on social media by a member of the equipment staff, no longer there. I didn't have anything to do with that. But yeah, those I was glad when we finally retired those, and I actually volunteered to douse them in gasoline and burn them. I hated them. Okay, I promise you I'll get to my favorite uniforms. So I thought that, and I think that the current helmet is awesome. I really think that the current helmet is pretty slick. With state of Florida on one side and palm tree on the other. I think those are good looking helmets. They really are, the white helmets. And I think that all white with Florida Atlantic and red across the chest and the numbers outline and the red numbers, I just think that's a good look. Those are probably my favorite FAU football uniforms. I'm into that. I really am. But I'll always defer to the old school Rusty Smith era FAU uniforms. All right. Oh, man, that's a lot of talk about FAU uniforms. But see, you got me down the wormhole. What's yours? What's yours, by the way? Let me know on social media at KLV Says. What's your favorite FAU uniform? We've still got a couple of questions here in the FAU fan mailbag. Actually, let's see. One more. And Voss messages in. Is there a reason why Florida State will not schedule FAU in football? I've received that question a lot over the years, and I don't know the answer. FAU has scheduled Florida multiple times, Miami multiple times, UCF multiple times, USF multiple times, but never Bethune-Cookman multiple times, FAMU multiple times. But I don't know why not Florida State. It is weird, right? And Howard Schnellenberger and Bobby Bowden were pretty tight. They were pretty good friends, and that game just never came together, and then there's never been much in the way of progress or really even traction, I don't think, with Florida State. I will say now, based on the state of the Florida State program, hey, Mike Norvell, sign us up. Come on, schedule us. We want to play you because I'm sure that it'll be very competitive. I'm not saying that I want to take advantage of Florida State now taking a dumpster dive, but I'm kind of saying it'll be nice to take advantage of them going up to Tallahassee now as opposed to, I don't know, last year. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I wish I knew, and I wish I had a better answer, but I don't. It's one of the mysteries of state of Florida college football. And that's your FAU mailbag here on the Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group. And again, FAU and UConn. It is FAU's first trip to UConn since 2002. This game is not in stores. It's going to be played in Hartford, not since the early 2000s, right after, in fact, FAU's ill-fated 2002 trip where they gave up over 60 points to Dan Orlovsky, UConn quarterback at the time. Has UConn played actually on their campus in stores. So this game's in Hartford. Back in 2002, kickoff temperature 37 degrees, and if you're scoring at home, that's still the coldest kickoff temperature in the history of FAU football. It was closely approached by Middle Tennessee State 2 years ago, November, 44-degree kickoff temperature, but not the 37 that 2002 team faced. It did not go well. It's going to be a low 60s kickoff temperature in Hartford on Saturday, so it's going to be awesome. Going to feel really, really, really good. UConn at 1-2 on the year. Tight loss to Duke. Blown out by Maryland. Beat Merrimack. So FAU and UConn, second time, all-time, 7 o'clock kickoff. I'll have the call with Chris Newbold. 6:30 the pregame on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network, Fox Sports 640, and the free Fox Sports 640 app. Wanted to go through quickly this FAU basketball non-conference schedule because it's official. And want to know how I know it's official? Well, one, there was a press release. But two, you know it's official when you go to FAUsports.com and you click on FAU basketball's schedule and you see all the non-conference matchups. All right. So let's just go through it real quick. November 4th, taking on Indiana State in Xenia, Ohio at the brand new John Wooden Family Fieldhouse. That is the opening game. Indiana State in the NIT championship game last year. New coach, much like FAU. Some of the big stars of that Indiana State team went on to St. Louis, but this is still a very quality mid-major program and a tough start to the year, much like FAU opening against Loyola last year. Very similar wavelength there, okay? Then FAU comes home November 8th to take on Coastal Georgia. That's a Division II opponent. Then at UCF, going into Big 12 country, I think UCF, this game right here, is this is the equivalent of Illinois Jimmy V Classic, okay? You're not playing at neutral site, and it's not the Jimmy V Classic, but it's a Big 10 opponent like it's a Big 12 opponent. It's a power opponent like FAU played last year, Illinois in the Jimmy V Classic, except it's UCF. It's in-state. It's Big 12. So that right there, there's parallels between that with John Jakus' scheduling and Dusty May's scheduling. Then there's the Field of 68, which FAU played last year. Charleston, Liberty, again, exact same when it comes to non-conference last year and this year. Then Charleston Classic. i.e. last year's Disney Invitational in Orlando. FAU started with Butler in that. They get Oklahoma State, another Big 12 opponent, to start in this Charleston Classic. Then they went on to play Texas A&M after they beat Butler. If FAU gets by Oklahoma State, then it's either Miami or Drake. And again, you're seeing all the parallels here, right? Like, this is appreciably similar. And then a championship game that most likely would be against a major opponent, a quad 1 or a quad 2. So quite honestly, to this point in the non-conference schedule through Charleston Classic, which goes through Thanksgiving weekend, this is pretty similar to what Dusty May scheduled for last year's FAU basketball team. And then Florida Gulf Coast, we know what happened in Fort Myers last year, so they come back. So again, same non-conference. FIU played them last year. Go to FIU on December 4th. Jacksonville comes in December 10th. Texas State comes in December 14th, and then at Michigan State. So that is your Arizona game right there. And do I think that Michigan State's going to be ranked in the top 10 when FAU gets up there December 21st? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be as high profile as Arizona was. That game was on Fox. I think there's a good chance this could be national television, FAU and Michigan State. But you can certainly make the case that John Jakus put together a schedule that was extremely similar to what Dusty May did last year, because you replace Eastern Michigan and Bryant, that Bryant game, with Jacksonville and Texas State, right? And we went through the ESPN Events Invitational, the one in Disney, and how it's identical to the Charleston Classic, field of 68, literally identical. Illinois last year is UCF, FIU playing them. Then Florida Gulf Coast. You've got number 4 Arizona, so that'll be Michigan State in this year's schedule. And then St. Bonaventure. I don't know if there is a comparison to St. Bonaventure. I don't think there's a comparison to St. Bonaventure on this schedule. But I think there's a chance, if things fall the right way, there's a chance that FAU's strength of schedule, their resume of teams they've played, and we'll see how much damage they can do, could be very much in the same neighborhood, if not exceeding what Dusty May's gauntlet was last year for the Beach Boys running it back with FAU basketball. I think John Jakus just did an excellent job of piecing this thing together. This is a hell of a non-conference schedule. It is challenging. It is, if things come together, achievable. And as John Jakus has put it, if you can win a couple of these big high-profile games, you are smack dab in the comfortable at-large conversation going into conference play, just like FAU was, Florida Gulf Coast loss notwithstanding, last year going into American Athletic Conference play. So I don't know if it was exactly blueprinted like Dusty May's construction of the schedule last year, but the way that it was put together is very similar, and I think FAU fans should be extremely happy about that, because it is clear John Jakus' philosophy to putting together a non-conference schedule in this new era of FAU basketball, where you're a player, where you're a contender, where we've seen it in action now as an 8 seed at large. Florida Atlantic name recognition is going to help it go a long way. You've got to start scheduling like this now. And you schedule like that because because we've seen it happen, that you can be in a very advantageous at-large position. John Jakus isn't trying to reinvent the basketball wheel. He's trying to carry the torch, have that torch passed and carry it from what FAU basketball was built into, and now he's trying to advance it. And that non-conference schedule is proof of that. So well done to John Jakus. Extremely well done to John Jakus, and that's going to be there's going to be some roadblocks. There's going to be some speed bumps. There's going to be some slalom hills, if you want to use a skiing analogy. I don't know why I went there with FAU, but you understand what I'm saying. But all that, if you can find a way through it and pick up some critical wins in that non-conference, boy, do you feel good going into conference play, because not only do you feel like, yeah, we're an AAC contender, you feel like if maybe we stumble a couple of times, Selection Sunday, if we don't win the conference tournament, Selection Sunday still might be a very happy occasion for FAU. That'll do it for the Florida Atlantic Voice. A reminder, FAU football at UConn, 7 o'clock on Saturday. Pregame 6:30, Florida Atlantic Sports Network, Fox Sports 640, or the Fox Sports 640 app. Myself, Chris Newbold, Mike Marezko. We have that for you as FAU looks to get back to 500 at 2-2 in this football season. And again, Florida Atlantic Voice presented by Robes Law Group. Always putting the community first. Office Delray Beach. ROBES. RobesLawGroup.com. That's Robes Law Group. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast to the Florida Atlantic Voice, focusing on FAU football and FAU basketball. I'm Ken LaVicka. I'll talk to you Saturday, and then we'll have a Florida Atlantic Voice day after on Sunday, reacting to FAU's matchup with UConn. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.